Australia? You've got to be kidding me. Just 2 weeks ago, I was standing here wearing this exact same t-shirt, absolutely buzzing because Australia had just beaten Turkey and reached the World Cup knockout stages. I genuinely thought we were witnessing the start of something special. I thought this young Socceroos side had arrived. I thought Nestori Irankunda was about to announce himself to the world. And I thought that Patrick Beach was about to become an Australian sporting icon. Instead, Australia are out of the World Cup, having lost on penalties to Egypt. And honestly, I don't think we can have too many complaints, because after 120 minutes and penalties, Egypt deserved it. Now, before all the Australian fans come charging into the comments saying, "Mate, we only lost on penalties," yes, we did. But penalties didn't knock Australia out. The performance did. So, today we're going to break down exactly what went wrong, why I think Tony Popovic got parts of this game completely wrong, and why Australia have thrown away the biggest opportunity in their World Cup history. Let's get into it. This is going to be a long one. Now, coming into this game, Australia should have been full of confidence. They had just beaten Turkey. Granted, they lost to the US, but they drew to Paraguay and they survived the group stage, and they were going into the knockouts. From there, you build momentum, and for the first time in a long time, there was genuine belief around this team. Not arrogance, just belief. Even the FIFA World Ranking suggested this would be incredibly close though, because Australia came into this game ranked 27th in the world, and Egypt were ranked 29th. So, unlike Turkey, where Australia were definite underdogs, this was a genuine 50-50 contest. Whoever held their nerve was probably going through. But football seems to have a funny way of completely laughing at your expectations, as against Turkey, Australia completely ripped up the script. Whereas against Egypt, they somehow managed to rip it up again, only this time they ate it, choked on it, and handed Egypt the pen to write the ending. Honestly, it's almost impressive. Now, when the lineups came out, I wasn't exactly convinced. Tony Popovic named an unchanged side from the Panama game, and on paper, I understood it. Australia had just kept another clean sheet, and the defence looked solid, so why change something that isn't broken? But there was one decision that immediately stood out to me, and that was Nestori Irankunda. He was again starting up front as the striker. Now, I've loved watching Irankunda play this World Cup so far. He's electric, he's fearless, and he's probably the most exciting young Australian footballer I've seen in years. But he's not a striker, and his biggest strengths are creating chaos out wide and making defenders panic. Instead, Australia asked him to spend most of the night wrestling centre-backs. It was kind of like buying a Ferrari and taking it off-roading. It might survive, but you're not exactly using it properly. And that problem became very obvious very quickly. And this was obvious when Australia have probably one of the worst starts possible. Just 13 minutes in, Egypt struck. An Egyptian free kick isn't fully cleared by Australia's defence, and Egypt pick up the ball again, courtesy of Karim Hafez, who then floats a superb crossover towards Emma Mashur at the back post, who then scores the header. It was 1-0 Egypt. While it had been coming, suddenly everything Australia had built over the last weeks had disappeared. The confidence, the momentum and the control was all gone, and from that moment, the game completely changed. Because Egypt suddenly had something to protect, and Australia had everything to lose. But credit where it's due, Egypt defended brilliantly. They stayed compact, they stayed disciplined, and they frustrated Australia every opportunity. Meanwhile, Australia looked strangely nervous, I thought, with passes going astray, crosses weren't finding anyone, and the attacking movement that looked so dangerous against Turkey had almost completely disappeared. It felt like the occasion had got to them. And I couldn't stop thinking, where was the Australia from the group stages? Where was that fearless team? Where was the energy? Because this looked like a completely different side. Though to be fair, it had looked like a completely different side since the USA game, but we move. So at half time now, it was 1-0 Egypt. If you'd offered me one word to describe Australia's performance, I probably would have gone with flat. Because Egypt weren't dominating, because Australia had possession, but they also didn't look dangerous, and they weren't creating clear-cut chances. And every time Egypt got forwards, it felt like they had a plan, while Australia didn't. And the worrying thing was, this wasn't just one bad half. This was starting to become a pattern. Against Panama, Australia had struggled creatively, and now against Egypt, the exact same issues were showing up again. The difference was, this time, the opposition punished them. And if Australia didn't find another gear after the break, their World Cup dream was most likely going to end much earlier than anyone had expected. Then the second half started, and I was just waiting for Australia to wake up, waiting for someone to grab this game by the scruff of the neck and finally say, alright, let's go, let's have a go at this. I was waiting for that moment where I could finally think, alright, Australia's finally turned up. But it just never came. Australia did eventually get themselves back into the match, although, let's be honest, it wasn't exactly the prettiest equaliser you ever see. The goal came courtesy of an Egyptian own goal from Mohamed Hani in the 55th minute. Now, I'm not going to complain, they all count either way, but it wasn't exactly a moment of attacking brilliance. Australia were level, but they still weren't looking convincing, and that was the worrying part. I was also hoping Australia were now going to go for a second goal, and they had moments in possession, and they also got into decent areas. But football isn't scored on possession, it's scored on putting the ball into the back of the net, and that was Australia's biggest problem the whole night. They just lacked quality in the final third. Every promising move seemed to end with a poor cross, a heavy touch, or a blocked shot, or a pass that just wasn't quite good enough. Meanwhile, Egypt looked comfortable, and while they weren't trying to dominate possession, because they didn't need to, they had a game plan. They sat deep, they stayed organised, and they just frustrated Australia while they waited for mistakes. It wasn't the most entertaining football in the world, but it works. And that's what knockout football is all about. Nobody remembers who dominated possession or who had all the passes and all the XG. They remember who goes through. So the game ended 1-1, meaning that it left extra time to decide who would be making history. Would it be Australia's first ever World Cup knockout victory, or Egypt's? This was the moment where heroes are made, where somebody produces that bit of magic. Instead, to me, everybody just looked exhausted. And you could see it, because players were cramping up, the passes were slowing down, and the decision making was arguably just getting worse. And the quality dropped massively. And honestly, the longer the game went on, the more I started to feel this had penalties written all over it. Neither side wanted to make that fatal mistake, which meant that nobody really took enough risks to actually win it. And eventually, that's exactly where we ended up, that dreaded penalty shootout. Now, as an England fan, I have a complicated history with penalties. They've brought me joy recently, but they've also brought me enough trauma to last several lifetimes. So, watching Australia walk up for this shootout, I wasn't exactly full of confidence. But I must stress that to prepare for the shootout, Tony Popovic had taken off Patrick Beach, the keeper who had played for Australia. Oh, there's a fight going on. Sorry, I'm watching the France-Paraguay game. Oh, okay, I see what's happened. They fouled the dictator and the dictator just wasn't having any of it. Where was I? Yeah. I must also stress that to prepare for this shootout, Tony Popovic had taken off Patrick Beach, the keeper who had played for Australia, literally the whole tournament up to this point, and he brought on veteran keeper Matthew Ryan. Apparently, Ryan was supposed to be Australia's penalty specialist, which is why he went on to save 0 penalties. Meanwhile, Egypt decided to watch Mbappe highlights, it seemed, but it didn't really matter because they scored all of their penalties while Australia scored 2, I think. And I think the penalty that really took the cake was Mo Salah's Panenka. It was such a rude penalty, and I think Ryan made it look so much better for Mo Salah with the fact that he had already dived and had no chance of saving it. So Egypt flew while Australia floundered. And while Australia did start first, and statistically the team that does start first normally wins, the odds were very much tipped out of Australia's favour when Harry Souttar stepped up and completely missed. Then Lucas Harrington also hit the bar, and as I said before, Egypt had scored all of their penalties up to this point, and after scoring their final one, it was all over. Egypt made history with their first World Cup knockout win, and Australia were frustratingly the ones going home. But fair play to Egypt though, because Australia were just downright terrible and Egypt deserved to win. They did earn it. Now I know some people won't like hearing this. They'll probably also say, but Liam, it was only penalties. And yes, technically, Australia technically didn't lose this game. But penalties didn't also lose Australia this game. The previous 120 minutes did. While Australia did draw the game, when you actually look at the game, Egypt looked like they knew exactly who they were, while Australia just didn't. They looked like a team waiting for somebody else to solve the problem. There wasn't enough movement, creativity, urgency, and for a team that came into this tournament with so much promise and so much momentum, I'm pretty sure they came into the US a month before everyone else, just to prepare better than everyone. That makes it so disappointing. But one of the biggest compliments you can pay Egypt is that they made Australia play their game slow, frustrating, scrappy, exactly how Egypt wanted them to. And Australia fell right into the trap. And with this, I'm not saying that Tony Popovic is a bad manager. Far from it. He deserves huge credit for getting Australia out of the group and actually winning against Turkey. Though I really need to stop bringing that up because Australia have not looked great since, and Turkey were also terrible that game. Leading on from that, I do think some questions need to be raised about Popovic and his style of management. His apprehension to take risks is something that might have cost him, and now Australia and him will leave with regrets. And the biggest one for me was the use of Nestor Irankunda for the last few games. He is one of Australia's brightest talents. He was playing for Bayern Munich before this season, because he's just that good. He's explosive, direct, fearless. But asking him to play as a striker just limits everything that makes him dangerous. And with the use of Irankunda as a striker, it also meant that Mohamed Toure, the actual number 9 and actual striker, had to sit on the bench, and he couldn't be dangerous leading from the front because he wasn't playing. So Australia never really adapted, and when plan A wasn't working, there didn't seem to be much of a plan B. Now, before this video becomes one long therapy session, let's remember something. Australia still had a very good tournament. They reached the knockout stages. They beat Turkey, something I didn't expect they would do, and I thought they had competed really well. This was still one of the younger squads they've taken to the World Cup. There is talent there, plenty of it, but it doesn't stop the defeat from hurting any less. But it also doesn't erase the progress that's been made. So the challenge now will be to make sure that this tournament becomes a stepping stone for the next World Cup and not a missed opportunity. But I can't lie, this one does sting, because it felt like a genuine opportunity. Australia weren't playing Brazil, or France, or Argentina, who they would have played if they had actually won this game, but they were playing a team ranked just 2 places below them, and a team that I hope they believe they could beat, and I believe they could beat. Instead, the World Cup has ended in the round of 32, not because Egypt were miles better, but because Australia just never played anywhere near their best. And it shows once again how football can be brutally cruel. One week, you're celebrating one of the biggest wins in recent Australian football history, and the next, you're booking flights home. But that's just the World Cup, I guess. It gives you hope, and then sometimes it absolutely rips your heart out. And I must admit, it did that twice last night, because I watched Argentina-Cape Verde, and Cape Verde had done so well until like 8 minutes until the end when Argentina scored. And genuinely, I went to bed in tears. I was hoping for an Australia win, and I didn't expect Cape Verde to win, but I had hoped they would hold on until penalties at least. But that's a story for another video, and if you want me to make a video about that, please just let me know in the comments. Hopefully, I imagine probably like 2 people are going to watch this video. But what do you think? Am I being too harsh? Did Australia deserve to go out? Or were penalties just cruel once again? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, because I do read every single one. or none of them, because 2 people watched this video and not even bothered to comment. But if you have enjoyed this reaction, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you're new around here, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care, and goodbye.